Hi everyone, my name is Marisa. If you're not familiar with me, I am the founder of LupusChick.com. We are a New York-based nonprofit for lupus patients and their family members, and we just basically give out a lot of information on lupus. We have many writers that talk about different topics. I'll do a lot of different articles on there. I'll do a lot of Facebook Lives. We have an amazing Facebook page. It's just under Lupus Chick. So if you have lupus or if you know someone that has lupus, just come on over and hang out with us. Literally, there are thousands of men and women on our Facebook page. They're amazing, and they're very open and honest, and they talk about a lot of different things with the disease that we often deal with. So I just wanted today to talk about a couple of tips that have helped me over the past 16 years. I was diagnosed with lupus when I was 23 years old, and so I feel like I've learned a couple of tips and tricks kind of along the way that I like to share with other people. And so before I get into them, I'll tell you a little bit about me. In addition to being the founder of Lupus Chick, I am also a journalist. And right now, well, for the past several years, I've been freelance because of, obviously, like health reasons. It's very hard for me to be able to work as a full-time journalist. My body just cannot keep up. So a few months ago, I wrote an article for Healthline, and it definitely resonated with a lot of people because, one of the most common questions I get from someone that's newly diagnosed or a family member that's trying to deal with the diagnosis of someone they love are what tips and would you suggest, or what things did you learn that would have helped you early on? So the article actually has 7, which I will link the article to the bottom of this video, but I'm going to share my top 3 really quick with you. And who knows, maybe they will help you a little bit. So we'll see. So the first thing I talk about in the article is journaling. And, some people already journal, and that's amazing if you already have that habit. I mean, I know some people that will literally write pages and pages every day of things that have happened in their life, and it's just incredible to have that record. But if that's not who you are, and when you think of journaling, you think of, oh, that's going to be a lot of work, I just want to tell you to start off small. I started off in a very small kind of like planner that I would leave in my purse, and my husband is actually the one who urged me to start journaling because those first few years after I was diagnosed, I just had so many changes going on in my body, and it's just humanly impossible to remember every single thing that is happening to you, every medication that you're trying, or every hospital visit, and what doctors are telling you, what foods you ate, did you sleep? Like, you just can't remember all these things. You might be able to remember the bigger picture, like I was in the hospital, I remember, for 2 weeks during this time, or I had a really bad flare-up and A, B, and C happened. But I'm talking about all the little pieces that make up the bigger picture. So I started to journal, like I said, in a small planner, and I would, originally I started by putting down what medications I was taking, how much, how many times a day I was taking them, also any supplements or vitamins I was taking, and then I added to that by putting in how many hours I was sleeping, if I had any doctor's appointments, and then for women, I would suggest you journaling the day that you get your period, when it stops, because I think a lot of you will find, or at least from what I've heard and from what I've read and what I've experienced myself, it is not uncommon for symptoms to flare up right before your period and to sort of die down once your period gets there. So that's another thing you might want to add. And then for me, I eventually also started adding food because I have a lot of food allergies, and allergies are not uncommon for people that have lupus. So, I put everything in there at one point. Stressors, good and bad stress, getting ready for my wedding, a death in the family, just stress with, maybe financial. All of these things have some effect. So every lupus patient will have their own set of stressors. Sun was a huge stressor for me. And a journal over time was able to show me, okay, when I go in the sun, within, a few hours, I have a fever. I might get a rash. I might get mouth and nose sores. And then if I'm in the sun or the heat for a really long extended period of time, for me personally, I will start having some heart involvement and things along those lines. So today my journaling has gone a little bit bigger. I'll show you just my journal. So this is my journal for 2017. It's a little bit larger, barely fits in my purse, but you could see I have horrible handwriting. This is what I put in every day. And a lot of that is, for right now, especially with the food I'm eating and symptoms and any supplements, because I'm doing a lot of functional medicine supplements right now and things like that. So, you know, it's really hard when you're in the thick of it or you're in a really severe flare-up to see any progress you've made. If you're trying, a specific medication, if you're trying to eliminate certain things out of your diet, maybe you found that there's food allergies. It's really hard, like I said, to remember everything. So a journal really lets you go back and see trends and see, okay, I know, A, B, and C causes me to have symptoms and maybe, could help actually bring on a flare-up. So those are things that I might want to avoid. That's what journaling really did for me. And I saw that. I knew that that's what was happening, but I saw it very clearly a few years ago because, so I was in a wheelchair for over a year when I had a severe flare-up maybe about 6 years now. But 2 years ago, I actually found my journal from that period of time, and one of the entries was talking about a physical therapist that used to come to our house. And I remember when she would come to the house, it was like torture for me because I was so weak. And I had lost all of my muscle mass, excuse me. And then she would come over and we would do these exercises. But this particular entry that I found went into how my goal for that time was to walk for 2 minutes without any assistance. And I remember feeling at that time like this is impossible. And I was shaking and I was sweating. And then afterwards, I literally went and slept for the rest of the day because I was that weak. And now I've come so far. I'm in this completely different season of life. And I knew that it was a hard season. I remembered that. And I don't ever want to go back there. And I remembered the physical therapist being there. But it wasn't until I saw my journal that I realized I'm so grateful for all of these things that I wrote down because it just shows me how far I've come. And it shows me what to avoid. And just so much more information. It's just a wealth of information. So I would suggest definitely journal. You can start small. You can start using an app in your phone if you don't have a planner. So that's one of my tips. Number 2, and it might seem really simple, is something I call a can-do list. I think just obviously having a chronic illness, and especially something like lupus, we never really know when it's going to rear its ugly head. We can feel great one day, and then the next day we can just be laid out in bed. So it's really hard to, I would say, not have goals, because we should all have goals, but I think it's hard to remember that, even though we have this illness, we're still capable of so much. And one thing I really had to just keep in check for myself is to not compare myself to my healthy friends and family and my healthy peers, because they're amazing in the things that they're doing. They also don't live with a chronic illness every day. They don't have to refrain from certain activities. They don't have to stay out of the sun. A lot of them don't take any medication. My husband is super healthy. I can't remember the last time he saw a physician. He never gets sick. So I think when you start comparing yourself, and I think women do this a lot more from what I hear, and I'm sure men do it as well, but maybe they're just not as vocal about it. But comparing ourselves constantly to people that are healthy can lead us down, I think, a very dangerous road. And we can really start to feel pretty terrible about just ourselves, and we're capable of just so much. So I would just encourage you to keep what I call a can-do list. And it's basically just a list that you write down all the things that you accomplished. And they don't have to be these major, huge accomplishments. They can be. But also just the small accomplishments. Something that maybe you weren't able to do a few years ago, but now you can. So I, write them down maybe every couple of days or every couple of weeks, just things that I remember. And I go back and I look on them and I think to myself, like, wow, I did so much in this past month. Maybe it didn't really seem like it. But again, especially with like brain fog and things like that, you may just not remember everything. So I would suggest the can-do list. And then last, I think just a great life rule, because as much as we like to control things, we are not in control, especially with an illness like lupus, and that is to just make adjustments. My husband always says to me, be flexible, and I've gotten better over the years, but it's definitely not my default. I like to have everything kind of planned out. I like to be scheduled, and then, with lupus, that like completely goes to the wayside. And I realized, a couple years in, because I'm kind of thick-headed and stubborn, but I really have no control. And there are some days that I wake up and I have a full plan of action, and then I can't do anything because I'm literally stuck in bed, or I wind up in the hospital, or just something happens. So I just try to be a little bit more flexible, and I try to make an adjustment. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So as a journalist, I love being a journalist. Unfortunately, my body does not like the typical journalism career of, say, being a reporter, 40, 50 plus hours a week, for a media outlet. And while I loved my job, my body just could not keep up. So I kept getting sick and winding up in the hospital and winding up on more and more medication. And it just, there just became a point where it just wasn't worth it anymore, because I'm only given one body and I'd like to live as long as possible. So I had to make an adjustment. And my adjustment personally was to become a freelance writer and just to write now as my health allows. And, sometimes that comes at a time when I'm in the hospital or I'm getting an IV treatment. But I'm able to have that flexibility in my career. Other adjustments, that I've gone through, have to do, I'd say, with, there's just adjustments every day, but I'm trying to think of big things to share with you. Like traveling. Traveling can be really tough on someone that has lupus. I know if I'm already kind of in a bad spot, or say I've had, a lot of lupus activity over a couple of months, or just some flare-ups, I know that getting on a plane or a couple of planes to get to a far-off destination is probably not the best idea for me at the time. So my husband and I will try to think of, different options, and that might be something like just taking a road trip, and maybe even if it's just a couple of hours away, but doing something a little bit more low key, something a little bit more slower paced. So, those are some adjustments we've had to make in our marriage, and just we both love to travel. Obviously not being able to go in the sun. My husband and I both love the water, so he'll usually go in the water during the day, and then I'll get to join him as the sun is going down. And, it's not my ideal, but at least I still get to spend time doing something that I really like. Another adjustment, even though I totally fought it and I didn't want to do it, was a couple of years ago. I did a short season of chemo. I lost a lot of my hair, and I was really upset about that whole thing. But I'm grateful I have a mom who's a hairstylist, and she showed me the whole world of wigs and extensions and hats and all these different things. And honestly, I got over it. I moved on, and I started to do different things. And, wigs were great. It was like a new person every day. And, yes, it stunk for a while. My hair grew back. It's even thicker now. So it was just an adjustment that had to be made. And you're going to find, especially with a chronic illness, adjustments need to be made on a regular basis. So I know that, for me, I don't know personally for you, but it's hard to just give up control. I think that that's just a natural reaction. But just try to keep in mind and be flexible. And, when you find a different detour and you find a different road around something, you might really enjoy it. And it may not seem like as big as an issue as maybe it was in the beginning. So I hope that makes sense. So yeah, those are just 3 tips that I like to share with people. I will add the link to the Healthline article below. You'll be able to read all of it. And then if you want, come and visit us at Lupus Chick. You can always reach out to me on there. The contact page goes directly to my email, or come visit us on Facebook. Thanks. Bye.